Hi, I'm Scott Shane. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. I usually write about national security, but I'm here today with a different kind of story. Today we posted my story on Cameron Harris, and he has kindly agreed to talk about something that's usually hidden from the public. He created a fake news site during the presidential election campaign, and he's agreed to talk about it and explain how it came about. So thanks a lot for being here with us
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. I have spent more than 30 years fact-checking stories and trying to get them right. So I'm somewhat horrified by the whole fake news phenomenon. But it's obviously very significant, very interesting. And so I really do appreciate your coming to talk about your site. So your site was ChristianTimesNewspaper.com.
Right.
So why don't you tell folks how you got started on this thing? You're a 23-year-old graduate of Davidson College. You majored in politics, political science, and economics, and you're working in political consulting now. So tell us how you got that site and how you had the idea to start putting up made-up stories on there.
Right. I first bought the domain in around November of 2015. I frequently look at, list of expired domain names and try to find the ones that have value to someone else.
Is that just to make money, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you'll buy one that's available cheap,
right,
and sell it to someone who really needs it.
Right.
Okay.
And ChristianTimesNewspaper.com was one I found.
Okay.
I didn't really have a plan for it, but I knew it had some value.
And what did it cost you to buy?
$5.
Okay.
Through GoDaddy.
And you did not have a plan when you bought it to create a fake news site.
I did not. No.
So when did that occur to you as a possibility? And the whole notion of a fake news site is new to most of us. How were you even aware that such a thing was possible?
I think just through observation of social media, I knew that these sites were already out there. They weren't very large. Their reach wasn't very large, and frankly, the writers of the stories didn't do a good job of speaking to their intended audience. So I was aware that they were out there, and I knew how the business side of it operated.
And so you decided you would do this. What was your motivation?
I think I just understood the point to go forward, understood how to write stories that people would click on and that people would share.
Okay, so you told me you're a Republican and you ultimately voted for Trump.
Right.
I think a lot of people would assume, and I think I probably assumed when I first saw that site, that it was there for political reasons.
Right.
That you're putting up these stories, all of which were based, vast majority of which were anti-Hillary Clinton stories, to hurt her, to in effect help Trump, indirectly help Trump. But you told me that's not really your motive. That was not your motive.
I didn't really have a political motivation whatsoever. It was
so what was your motive?
Financial. It was a way to make money.
So how do you make money from putting up bogus news stories on the web?
They spread so far that the reach grows, and the more clicks that come in, the more ad revenue is generated. The ads you see in the sidebar of a website that you see on New York Times website, those same ad networks were active on my site.
And you were making all or most of the money through Google, right?
Correct.
And so Google has a program where you put up your content and you leave certain spots for ads.
Right.
And you don't make a decision to put an ad in that spot. Google does it all for you, right?
Google, through their own algorithm, predicts what consumers want to see in an ad space.
And they're assessing what you put on your site, and then
not always, I don't think. Obviously, that plays a role into it, but it's also the consumer data that they have on the individual users.
So you would be, you were putting up these fake news stories, and then there'd be an ad for shoes or something that showed up alongside it. And every time somebody clicked on the shoe ad, you would get some
fraction of a dollar.
Fraction of a dollar, okay.
30 cents per click.
Okay, okay. And so tell us in particular about a particular story that I focus on in my story that was your greatest hit, so to speak. It was one that said, if I recall the headline correctly, tens of thousands of fraudulent Clinton ballots, found in Ohio warehouse. This was a story that claimed that thousands and thousands of ballots, Ohio ballots pre-marked for Clinton, had been found in this warehouse. Why did you write that story at that time? This was the end of September.
This is the end of September. Trump had not necessarily gone full into his claims that the election was going to be rigged, or hadn't really started alluding to it. And so I understood that there was already this predisposition there in the electorate, especially the Republican electorate, to believe it, whether they thought that he was going to win in a landslide and the only way Hillary could win was to steal the election, or whether they thought she was just so corrupt she would. There was already this predisposition. We could see it in polling. I am in a political consulting business. I know how to read polling, and it was very obvious that voters were already having these concerns.
The concern was that Trump was the real winner, but that somehow Hillary would steal the election.
Or it could be that Trump could never win because Hillary was going to steal it anyway. It's to each their own at that point.
Right, okay. So the point was not to really necessarily tell people something they didn't know, although the details were something they didn't know, but really tell them something that supported the beliefs that they already had.
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
Facebook in itself, where most of these stories were spread,
that's the psychology.
Creates this bubble, an echo chamber, where the stories that appear on top of someone's newsfeed are stories that their friends are already sharing, their friends are already liking. So they're going to click on something that they want to believe. It works the same way on the other side of the...
So we got some questions coming in. I want to get to those. But before we do that, tell people, by the way, I should say that anyone who's interested in posing a question can put it in the comments section on our Facebook Live site on the New York Times and Facebook, and they can pose a question that way, and we'll ask some of those. But let me ask you this. Explain how you used Facebook to promote the stories that you put on your fake news site, ChristianTimesNewspaper.com.
We just put them out there. They would organically spread.
But you created some Facebook sites of your own, right?
Several
pages of
Facebook pages on different topics that were a natural medium to put these stories out there.
And give us an example of one of the Facebook sites that you created.
Whenever Colin Kaepernick, whenever that was the talk of the nation, I created a Facebook page about Americans that would always stand
when
for
Colin Kaepernick declined to stand for the national anthem, this football player, because he was protesting police shootings of black people, basically, right? And so that became a hot topic.
There was a reaction on the other side, the patriotic reaction.
Okay.
It was a natural narrative from which to get people to like a page because it feels like they're supporting.
And wasn't your page called something like "I always stand for the national anthem" or something like that?
Something simple like that.
Yeah. Okay. So then you have lots of followers for that Facebook page, and then when you post your Christian Times newspaper links there, they start spreading. Okay. And we asked CrowdTangle, which counts the sharing of stories, and that story was shared with 6 million people, so it had a huge impact. A lot of these questions seem to come down to the ethics of this, and that's what I wanted to get to anyway. One person asks, do you plan to do this in the future or keep doing it? In other words, do you plan to stay in the fake news business or take another opportunity to do it?
No.
Why or why?
With the election ending, the market for fake news has significantly dropped, especially with Facebook and Google taking actions against the spread of these stories. That it's not as easy to.
Yes, in fact, your Facebook page, you took it down after all the ads disappeared because Google made a policy decision after the election not to put ads on fake news stories on fake news sites. Another person asks, how do you feel knowing that a democracy can only function in a country with a reliable press, and you're eroding that? How do you feel about this? She asked.
Faith in the press nationally, polling is been down for a long time. It's, as partisan politics takes over and as confirmation bias, and I actually read a term the other day I really liked, political tribalism, as people segment themselves and identify based on political ideology. They're not going to trust, even mainstream media sources as much because they want to confirm their own individual beliefs, and they want to read things that support their side of an argument. So
Okay.
I don't believe I played a role in affecting faith in the press. I think that is a natural human reaction to our entire political and social climate at this point.
But you are knowingly, you as a citizen who's interested in politics, you depend on having reliable information, right? And you go out there looking for it, right? So don't you think people have a right to feel aggrieved or feel offended if you are actually polluting the stream with stuff that's not controversial, not exaggerated, but made up out of whole cloth?
Of course. I was offended last week whenever BuzzFeed published the dossier, and they used the rationalization that it was unverifiable but explosive enough to let America decide.
Okay, so you're talking about the so-called dossier prepared by a retired British intelligence agent about Donald Trump and Russia and the supposed attempts of the Russian government, Russian intelligence, to bribe him and blackmail him and essentially get him into their clutches. You're right that that's extremely controversial in journalism circles. But, we reported on that, we at the New York Times, and we reported what we knew about it, which was it was prepared by this British intelligence agent based on what people in Russia had told him. That's not the same as making something up out of whole cloth. In other words, the material has some basis. The British intelligence agent believes it's true and made every effort to ascertain whether it was true. That was his purpose. That's what he was being paid for. Isn't that different from making up fake news?
Making up something out of whole cloth is not new in politics. Barack Obama told half of America that if they liked their health care plans, they could keep it.
Okay.
And he knew that wasn't true. He knew that for a fact. The people around him knew that but he had a presidential podium and said it anyway.
Okay. So a reader, Gus Sentimentus, asks, will you donate your profits to a worthy journalistic charity?
It would depend on what the charity was.
Okay. Would you consider doing that?
I would consider it.
You did this because you needed the money, right?
It was financially motivated, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sarah McCullough asks, are you satisfied with the outcome of the election, and how significant of an effect do you think your false data had on the election outcome?
I don't think it influenced the election at all.
Explain why you think that. I mean, let me just, common sense would tell me, I read somewhere on the web that Hillary Clinton has somehow engineered a whole bunch of election fraud in Ohio. Aren't I less likely to vote for her and more likely to vote for her opponent?
Well, my approach to these stories was to cater to an audience that would never consider voting for Hillary Clinton anyway.
Okay.
I honestly do not believe that a month before the election there were that many undecideds in America that were waiting for another explosive story to make a decision. Most people had made up their minds at that point.
And you don't think the, just sort of adding to the notion of a corrupt Hillary Clinton, corrupt Hillary as Trump used to call her, didn't have, at least at the margin, some effect on the undecideds, who are the ones who really decide an election in this country?
I think she and her campaign took care of that themselves.
Okay. David asks, can you be sued for libel?
I'm not sure.
Not sure.
It's not a
okay.
question I can answer.
Okay.
Not
Heidi asks, she says this was posted on Christian Times newspaper. Do you consider yourself Christian? Doesn't this go against Christianity?
I have a religious background. I grew up in a church.
Does this go against Christianity in any way?
That's another question that's much too large for me to answer.
Okay. So when you look back on this for you lasted a period of months. The site's now down. The election's over. When you look back on this, do you have any guilty feelings about it? Do you have mixed feelings about it? What's your take on
I have mixed feelings.
your small role in this world of fake news?
I have mixed feelings because my role was extremely small,
Mhm.
but the larger picture is that there is a political climate in America that provides for fake news stories, disinformation, such divided politics to prosper.
Mhm.
I think we're seeing that trend, and we're not going to see it fall away anytime soon. Whether it's fake news or whether it's bad politics, it's going to keep going because the way our society is composed right now almost creates the market for it.
Mhm.
We're so divided, and we separate ourselves by ideology.
Have you have you had any family members or friends tell you, essentially criticize you for this, tell you it was a bad idea, tell you you're contributing to sort of the breakdown of journalism or accurate information or politics?
Not necessarily, because at each person that I came across that I began telling this story had an opportunity to explain my own thoughts on why there was an environment for fake news and why I didn't think there was necessarily that large of an effect.
A guy I know who studies this whole realm told me that a lot of your material was retweeted by Russian, essentially bot networks, that were very active and that were part of this, of what the intelligence agencies describe as a concerted effort by Russian intelligence to affect the election, hurt the image of American democracy, and so on. So he actually said, I should have asked you about that, and I should have put that in there.
Well, you
were you aware of that?
Well, no, I was not. I was aware that there were, these large social
They're not
media
identified
networks.
as Russian,
No,
but they're created by Russians.
And
Yeah.
I would have no way of knowing
Right.
that.
Mhm.
And you mentioned in your article that I had no connection with any Russian operation.
Yeah, he actually asked me, how do I know that? And I said, that was my very strong belief. I guess I technically don't know that you don't have ties to Russian intelligence. But it is actually my impression that you're what you appear to be, a guy who recently graduated from college, found a way to make some money on the side. And I have to say, I'm not sure you've fully thought through the consequences of participating in this phenomenon, but I think you certainly have understood the phenomenon and the fact that when you find people who are fired up for a political cause, and you feed them what they want to hear, you feed them evidence that their views are correct to support their views, you get a real reaction, and
that's why Donald Trump will be inaugurated.
Yeah.
On Friday. He took much the same approach, not the fake news approach, and I'm
Mhm.
not saying fake news
Mhm.
influenced that. I'm saying
Mhm.
that he bought in and fed into that phenomenon.
Well, we have to
widely in
wrap this
America.
up in a minute, but just explain why you think Donald Trump's election, or how it related to the fake news phenomenon, or to
I think the psychology of it
Okay.
is the same, in which he understood that this large swath of Americans, that while they may have voted for Barack Obama,
Mhm.
they were looking for something else, and
Mhm.
they wanted to be told what they wanted to hear, because no one was really speaking to them.
And what do they want to
anymore.
hear in this case?
That jobs are coming back, that they're going to protect their communities, that someone is going to come help them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what Trump's message was, and Hillary Clinton failed to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you very much for spending this time with me. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.